Okay, whenever you're ready.
Receiving content. Yay, we are live on YouTube now for the Classic FASERIP podcast. But we're not actually going to start the show just yet. Give a few moments for some people to, filter in, maybe if they want to, or
Okay.
Fun stuff like that. Put you in as a special guest.
Ooh, special guest. That means I get to wear the helmet and lick the windows while we're driving.
Well, not that special, but...
Now, I do have to warn you, I have a dog who will intermittently
Yelp.
leap from the couch and run chasing nearby cats and barking. So if you hear that, that's what it is. It's not just strange random stuff in my background.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. Speaking of the devil,
Godzilla has made her presence known.
Just trying to share it out for everybody right now. We actually have one person watching already, as we're just waiting for things to happen. That's how every good podcast works, right?
Oh yeah, that's Hey, this is Shooting Womp Rats wasn't live, so we would just record it all and they would mix it together and then.
Oh really?
Yeah. So I would get to hear it about 2 weeks later. It was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. Cool. I wrote the Star Wars RPG thing, and that was sort of the same situation as the Marvel stuff was. I threw out a suggestion that, hey, someone needs to do this, and someone said, well, why don't you do it? And I said, I could do that. That's where it came from.
All right, I've shared it out enough that if people find it, they find it. Okay.
Okay.
Let's roll with the show finally. You ready?
I'm ready.
Excellent. 3, 2, 1. We're live with the Classic FASERIP podcast. I'm Vince. I'm sitting here on YouTube with the Classic FASERIP podcast, and I have special guests from the community. Keith, I'm not going to give out your last name, but unless you want to, that's up to you. I don't normally do that.
No, let's not.
Okay, fine with me. But we're live this week. We're back after a little bit of a break. We're going to talk a little bit about some classic FASERIP Marvel tonight, folks. We're live, so if you ever do want to watch us on YouTube, you just go to youtube.com/c/TheEvilDM, and that is my channel. And you can check out the Classic FASERIP podcast. We have the previous episodes there, as well as this will always be audio format for those folks that just like to listen audio-wise. But let's get the show rolling tonight. So, Keith, why don't you start off by just telling us a tiny bit about your gaming background and how you got interested in Marvel, like when you first saw it, just general, so people can get the feel of you as our host here.
It was probably 1984. I'd played Dungeons and Dragons a couple times. I had a friend who sold me his old 1970s AD&D Player's Handbook for the princely sum of $10. And I lived in Ohio, in Cincinnati, and there was a local mall called Surrey Square, and they had at the time a tiny, really horrible bookstore. And when I say horrible, God only knows how this place ever survived, and it must not have survived too well because it ended up being closed. But I walked in, and they happened to have a bunch of AD&D modules right there at the doorway. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And I was reading comic books, more specifically Uncanny X-Men, and saw Breeder Bombs, the first Marvel module.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
And I had I knew what role-playing games were, and I was like, oh my God, I've got to get this. Because it was in with the AD&D stuff. I just, not reading the back of it, not analyzing it in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I bought it thinking it's AD&D. you know, and quickly realized, wait a minute, this doesn't use Dungeons and Dragons. What is this? And I found out pretty quickly there was a Marvel game, and this predates the advanced set. So I ended up tracking down the basic set, Yellow Box, and couldn't find anybody that wanted to leave Dungeons and Dragons to play Marvel. And a couple years went by pretty much with me not doing anything with Marvel, and then the advanced set came out, and it became a whole different story. And about that time, I was in with a group of people who really weren't fond of Dungeons and Dragons, and who wanted to play Marvel. So, and that's the beginning of it.
Your problem with finding players is it was like, oh, that's just a comic book, that's not D&D or something like that. Was that the attitude, or?
No, they just wanted to. I think it was more. We were 12, 13 years old. The idea of it was more, I get to kill goblins, and you mean I can't kill anybody? You mean Wolverine can't kill anybody? What is that? You know, why do I got to lose my karma points for that? So, and you know, I still get people who, to this day, I'm much older now, obviously, and I still get people who complain about, what do you mean I can't kill? Yeah, you know, it's not a good idea. You don't want to do that, you know. So
that was my problem selling it to my current group right now was, well, they're like, oh, it's superheroes, the game's a little wonky, and I was just like, well, so I pitched them, and they're like, oh, same thing as you. We can't kill anybody. We lose experience points if we kill, because they, you know, D&D players accumulate the karma to experience, obviously. Yep. So I had to sell it to them as them being villains, and that's my podcast, the other one, X Universe, that I do, Marvel's X Universe. They're all villains, and they've been on a wild ride right now as villains. I don't know if you've ever listened to it or attempted to listen to it, but they're nuts.
I have not had the opportunity yet. I will check it out because I've enjoyed the podcast that you guys do for Classic and FASERIP. So
yeah, this is my face-to-face group we do right here in my house, and we record it. We have 4 or 5 players, depending on the week, and they're going insane right now with being villains. And just, I did this whole entire chart for karma, so they wouldn't lose experience. I'm saying it too now, so they wouldn't lose karma for killing. But I don't condone the killing. So if they do happen to kill,
yeah.
I limit the number of karma. So, for example, if they kill a bunch of people on a mass killing spree, they're only going to get a certain amount of karma points for it. So they can't go around just, haha, kill, haha, kill, haha, kill. So I say, so, for example, I have it like, if they kill 5 innocent people accidentally or on purpose, that's where it caps. They can kill a zillion people, but they're not going to get any more karma for it. They're capping at that. I'm trying to prevent like murder hobo syndrome going on. Good luck.
It can be daunting at times.
It's actually been pretty good. Well, not recently, but they were doing pretty well for a while. They weren't killing many people. They went through many episodes of only just fighting heroes, and getting through that. But yeah. So do you have a current group right now that you play, or?
Funny enough, I'm actually I'm running in a AD&D game. I'm playing, someone else is running, and I've been doing that for about 2 years. So I mean, I haven't run Marvel in probably 5 or 6 years, and it got to a point where we did a lot of Star Wars, and we did a lot of we've done AD&D and Vampire the Masquerade. I mean, just a lot of different stuff. So.
Oh, I love Vampire the Masquerade. Never can get a game of that going, but I love it. So.
Yeah, I want some sort of. I want it to be like Supernatural, or the. And I'm trying to think of
Buffy.
Well, not necessarily Buffy, but James Woods' vampire movie, From Dusk Till Dawn.
Dusk Till Dawn, right.
And everybody wants we had a guy who played a mute character, and I'm like, how in the world are you going to play mute in a vampire game? How are you going to yell for help or anything? So this went on for a couple games, and finally he rigs up this little speak and spell thing, and I told him, he was trying to type out messages, and I said, no, you can't you can't just speak normally. I said, you've got to do the, speak and spell, that sort of thing, and it was hysterical. It's just a lot of fun. So
I was playing in a D&D game a couple months ago, and there was a player that made his character a mute, like your friend did in that game, and he actually stuck with the character role. As the player, he did not talk either. He had a dry erase board, and he wrote everything down and just kept... Even as the player, he was doing that. So he really was like, a Daniel Day-Lewis type person going on there with character roles. He was really getting into the mood. And the DM actually gave him extra experience for just sticking with it. So
well, that's cool.
Yeah. So let's get into some FASERIP here now. So we've people know who you are. They know who we are. They've listened to the show before. But let's talk a little bit about control power, specifically one that probably in the community I've seen hundreds of threads about, hundreds of questions about. And by all means, myself and Keith here, to those listening, are not experts on this at all. The only expert on this would be Jeff Grubb. And
we could say Dave Martin too.
Dave Martin, correct. Yes. Dave Martin or Jeff Grubb. Those are the two that you can run up to, and if they give you an answer, that's the answer is going to be the official answer. What we give is just opinion based. And sometimes I have to actually say that only for the simple fact because people are like, whoa, I heard it on your show. You said this. Well, no. We can help you decide things, but we can't tell you things. But disclaimer out of the way. Mind control. Have you ever used this in your group as a player or a judge? Or allowed it, I should say.
Yes. Yes, I both, as a matter of fact. I tend to limit it more to, if you've ever read Stephen King's Firestarter.
Yes.
The auto hypnosis that the dad has, that he just locks eyes with somebody and can push a suggestion. That's how I describe it, at least in my game. And I tend to do less of the seize total control. Now, I know there are versions that are like puppetry. Basically you make somebody a puppet. And I think for the most part, players tend to avoid using it on one another. It's probably a good idea. I've seen it happen. It did happen in one game and didn't work well. So, I mean, for the most part, it's been everybody's stayed pretty well behaved with it. Emotion control, I can't say that it's ever come up, but then again, with as many powers and as many variations as you have in the Ultimate Powers book and the Player's Handbook, it's possible you could never roll emotion control.
I actually use the basic revised edition as my go-to for my group, only for the simple fact it's really scaled down to a smaller level, and a lot of the rules are open for interpretation, and I can always just stack on things from the advanced rules when I need them. So I don't have to full-blown go with everything that's there. I have this, like, wall barrier for everything, and I'm like, maybe there's a crack in the wall and this rule slips in, and the group likes it that way. So I prefer the basic revise. Well, more people do advanced revise, but it's the flavor of whatever people want. Some people like this, they like that. But mind control is a power that's currently used by one of the villains in my actual play, my group right now, and he has used it on other players, but he generally uses it just to get his way in the game. So I always wondered. Now, when I do mind control, I give him the option to do a suggestion, like you said. I give him the option to do a complete domination over the subject, and I also let him do implant emotions, because I kind of combined emotion control with mind control in my game.
Okay.
So I kind of allow that to happen. He also has the ability of telepathy with mind control. Okay. Now,
and I can see where that would work. That would be, certainly if you have the ability to control somebody's mind, manipulating their emotions. It's all biochemical anyway, so it's the possibility of manipulating and controlling would be right there.
Which is always I always wonder why they split the two up, and I'm not sure why. And that probably might be a question for Jeff or Dave. Why do they split those two powers up? Because I would think they go hand in hand, like you said. But
oh, I would agree. I mean, and it's they did a couple really sort of strange things with some of the power sets that there were references to things that never showed up that were in the ultimate what was it? Oh, Dragon Magazine. They did a couple articles where they dropped in powers that they forgot to put in otherwise. So it was,
it's TSR.
I don't know. Just some of the stuff just seems strange.
So when I do mind control and I want the player, to do it, I have him roll under his mind control power, obviously. Tell me the result, be green, yellow, or red. Depending on what he's doing, I will raise the level of it. So a lot of times I'll say, well, he'll need a yellow to do a certain thing, or he'll need a red if it's really a difficult thing. I don't really do the column shifts back and forth, which I probably should be doing instead of doing the coloring. It might be, but I guess it's kind of the same thing if you do the coloring versus the column shifts. What do you think about that?
Well, it all comes down to preference. I mean, to be real honest with you, if, and here's the thing, most people will want to go, well, what do I need? What do I need to get to make that roll? And then you've got to come up with something. So that's, to me, that's where the yellow or the red or the green feet comes in. But you could certainly, maybe he's having a bad day. Maybe he has a migraine. Maybe he has, how many times has Peter Parker lost his powers from a cold, or I mean, they even went so far as to do it in the movie, the Tobey Maguire version.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
So I mean, it's anything could happen, and I mean, as long as you're being consistent with it, I don't think players should complain too terribly much. Of course, they're players; they're going to complain about everything. So
I don't think he hasn't had any real complaints about it, because I've been pretty fair about it, and I'll be like, we do it logically, we approach it that way. If he's going to mind control like 20 people in the area, I'm like, well, if they're normal humans, just give me a green. I'll be like that. But if it's like advanced scientists and maybe a superhero, I'd be like, yeah, you're gonna need a yellow or maybe a red, depending on who he is.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will just have him roll to see what he gets, and then I will do an opposing check for the other person on their psyche to see if they try to beat that color. Generally, I'll do that.
I do a lot of automatic feats, and if, for instance, if my psyche is 4 ranks less than his mind control, I've lost. Unfortunately, there's too much willpower there. Are there ways around that? Sure. I mean, Marvel is just like any other game from AD&D on, where you can min-max if you want to do that. I really don't see where that's... To me, it's not fun. To other people, it might be. I mean, I couldn't see a GM going, oh, wow, I hope they min-max today.
Not this one.
Yeah. I mean, I've taken all sorts of strange things. I ran a Heroes game one time, based on the TV series. And I came up with a whole bunch of different character archetypes. And one of them was he had plant manipulation and plant growth. And he sold pot. So that he became the kingpin of Louisiana or New Orleans. And this was all around the time of Katrina. So, it was one of those things where the player just thought it was the greatest thing in the world. He was like, oh my God, this is so stupid, but I love it, So it works. It just, you gotta have an idea, and you gotta take them on the journey with you, I think.
Yeah, it's all open to interpretation, so that's what's good about this game. So I've had him do it versus other players too. So like he tried to dominate other players, and my players were actually kind of smart when they rolled up their characters, because we did it as a group collaborative thing. And I allowed them, when it came to talents, I allowed them, since the talents are mostly, a lot of them are outdated as far as, journalism, things like that. I kind of let them just pick.
Yeah.
So, as we were doing it, a good portion of the group picked resist domination because they knew this player and what he would do. So, they all have that buffer against him when he tries to do things to them. So, I always ask him, are you planning on dominating these players, as in making them do something, or are you just planting suggestions, or are you trying to just do an emotion? So that's where I go that way first.
Okay. Have now let me ask you this. I noticed that you were talking about the outdated nature of the talents, and that's certainly very, it's one of those things that, unfortunately, even if you look at other things where say, for instance, just the way they handle money in the game and other things like that. There's a lot of stuff that's outdated. And I mean, I'm sure that there are ways around it. But with talents, have you ever used the ultimate talent list for your players, or don't let them peruse that at all?
No. We actually just did talents based on what their character concept was. It says basically to cater the character what the player wants. So I was like, well, look at the talents list. If you don't find something we don't like on it, let's make up something for it. Like, one of my characters has a talent feat of being a magician, because that explained his character. He wanted to be a street magician.
Okay.
So he has the ability of street magician, which in a sense gives him the sleight of hand ability. So when he was a pickpocket, there's his sleight of hand ability.
Okay. And see, that would work.
You had asked about resources. We don't actually use the resources as it is listed in the book. I actually went with full-blown actual cash money because I decided they're villains, and the villains are going to be constantly robbing banks, so that number is going to be going up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So I just said, screw it. We're just going to keep calorie of cash. And I'll just translate it backwards as far as what it would actually be when we need to roll for things. That's why I did ask a couple times in the community, what is there an actual chart referencing how much this equals that? And I don't think anybody actually had an answer for me. And most people are like, I think you're thinking of the DC Heroes game, because that actually has a reference to money.
Actually, I can answer that question for you.
Oh.
Basic yellow box, and the only place I've ever seen this listed, is the basic judges screen. There's a reference to, they have resource points. You got 2 resource points for feeble, 4 for poor, 6 for typical, so on and so forth. And at the back of this insert for the judges manual, they say that each resource point is roughly equivalent to $32. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the only place I've ever seen that reference. And I was like, wow, I wonder how well that translates. And if you figure it out for what your weekly intake is and, times it by 32, you get a rough idea of 1980s resources.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how that worked out. But I mean, that's the only place I've ever seen it.
That's weird. I didn't even think to look in that box set. I have the box set. It's on my shelf. I just never bothered to look through that because I was like, why? It's the revised. It should have everything.
That's it. And I think they did away with it. I think it was too much bookkeeping. I mean, that would be my guess. Who wants to spend precious game time figuring out, I spent 32 points last week and 6 points this week, and that's 38. I only had 40. No, you don't want that. I don't want that. It's too much time.
These are questions that I attempted to ask Jeff Grubb when I was at North Texas RPG Con this year, because he attends that convention. But every time I saw him, he was either having dinner or he was in the middle of running a game, so I wasn't going to run up to him and go, hey! Out of respect for the guy, let the guy have his life. I mean,
there you go.
I know you're supposed to go up to people at conventions, and that's the whole point, to meet these people, but I felt uncomfortable bothering the guy while he was having his dinner, or while he was running a game. So
yeah, the few times I've met people at conventions, I've tried to be real respectful of it. Um, I've met Matt Wagner, who wrote Sandman Mystery Theater. I met Chris Claremont.
Oh.
Not enough to say, well, Chris and I had a conversation or anything like that, but I've met him a couple times. I had stuff signed by him. Fabian Nasia and Mark Bagley. I met Mark Bagley a couple times, actually. They're all really super, super nice people. So, I mean, and I'll tell you, this is sort of a funny story, and I thought about this, especially since he was in the news over the last week. I met Harlan Ellison one time, and it was at Dragon Con in 1995, and he called me I can't really say what he called me, but it was a freaking idiot, so you translate as you will. And I was like, who is this old guy, and why is he, because I said something about, at the time I was young, and I didn't like Jack Kirby's artwork, and I said, Jack Kirby, that guy, whatever. Who's he? We were in an elevator, and he turned and goes, "You're a freaking idiot." And I'm like, the heck is this guy? And he walked out, and the guy who was standing there, who had a piece of colored Jack Kirby artwork that they were getting people to sign for Chris Reeves, turns to me and goes, "You just got insulted by Harlan Ellison." And I'm like, who? So, and then of course I realized who he was later, and it was like, wow. And I had a friend who was terribly impressed with that story. He was a huge Ellison fan.
Well,
you
had you had an interaction, so
that's it.
Not a good one, but you had one.
Yep. It was more amusing than anything else. So.
So back to so that they had separated in the advanced book the emotion controls, like we had touched upon, and I've never actually used it as a split, but you can bestow emotions on people as far as respect, love, fear, hatred, loyalty, and doubt, and pleasure, which I don't think they needed that one, but sure, why not?
I'm not sure how that functions as an emotive, but okay. I mean, hey, who am I to judge?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but and you get a chance to break these things, just like mind control, anytime that you do something that would be normally against your normal moral code in life. So, for example, if I was mind controlling your character and I told you to go, your superhero, for example, and I told him to go, yes, I want you to go to the bank and rob the bank, and I want you to kill everyone in the bank. You would get a chance to, you would go to the bank, and then once you got to the bank to attempt to do it, you'd actually have a roll against your moral code, I want to say, and give you a chance to see if you can break free of the mind control. That's how I would handle it. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I would say first attempt at control, obviously there's some sort of resistance that, I try to fight it off. Okay, well, if you fail, you're under the control. Whenever you get into situations where you're breaking their moral code or you're forcing them to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do, I try to use the same premises, basic hypnosis, that you can't really make somebody do something they really wouldn't do anyway, but you can sort of edge around it if you're smart, clever, and
very true.
Maybe you have psychiatry. Maybe you have hypnosis as a skill, and you're a skilled hypnotist, and now you've got the ability to control minds and emotions. And how skilled would a master manipulator be like that? How, PhD in social work or PhD in psychiatry or psychology, and you're able to manipulate and flip people at the drop of a hat. So it would certainly it could be nasty and
dangerous.
Resisting it could be a big push. Maybe that might be the whole premise of that particular adventure right there. You could set up if you ever read Alias by Michael Bendis, Jessica Jones is controlled by the Purple Man, and the TV series did it pretty well. The comic did it even better because they could go wherever it is they needed to go, whereas the TV has restrictions about ratings and whatnot. But I mean, it's, there could be a whole premise behind it. There could be a whole series of adventures where dealing with the ramifications of what happened to you or what happened to these victims. Maybe your villain's victims show up looking for him. Hey, if he controlled me and made me rob 6 banks and kill a half dozen people, and I might want to go get a little, piece of that action, whether it's taking some of his money or trying to take his life. Maybe, and there could be any number of things. And I'm sure you've thought of various scenarios where that's going to backfire on him at some point.
Oh, yeah. He's going to be having some, yeah. Won't say too much.
Won't get into that.
Yeah. He does listen, so, I'm not going to give away too much, and he's probably talking like, oh, they're talking about me now. So he's probably smiling. But anyway. Okay, cool. Another reason why I had asked you on the show tonight was to talk a little bit about the projects that you work on for the Unofficial Canon Project on Facebook, which is a wonderful group that creates wonderful material, and you have created various supplements yourself. So tell us your process for doing that, because there's a lot of people out there I've seen, ask questions. How do I start? How do I do this? How do I do what you guys do? Where do I get this? Where do I get that? And I see it's a repeated question a lot. And I don't know if you guys, I've never seen an FAQ or anything, so to speak, on the Facebook page. So maybe we should go over that here.
I really don't think there is one. And I mean, it's sort of crazy. I know, I've been around the Star Wars, or I'm sorry, not Star Wars. I got that on the brain right now. I've been around the Marvel RPG email list and that community for probably since '93. So, I mean, once upon a time, there was an email list. And a lot of the people who are still around and who are really, really old school, old-time hangers-on gamers, people who Marvel enthusiasts, are from that group. George Henson from, or I don't know, I'm getting George's last name wrong. I probably am. I'm sorry, but I knew George from way back when, and only on the email list. And we got to talking about something one night, and I can't remember how exactly I got invited into the group. Someone just invited me, and they were like, hey, we're working on these projects. You should be a part of this. You're always, dropping stats in, or, you contribute a lot to, whether it was Classic Marvel RPG or Classic Marvel Forever, or I had websites that were dedicated to my campaigns that are now long gone, but they were, and it was just, hey, you should be, you should get in on this. And I said, well, okay, and I got to thinking about it. And a few years ago, I sat down and was going to write. I had come up with this sort of merged Marvel DC universe. And it was me creating stats for all these different characters. And, how could they exist in the same timeline, that sort of thing. And along the way, the question came up of, hey, has anybody ever done any sort of homemade Golden Age source book? And of course the response was no. And I said, well, somebody ought to write that. And somebody said, well, why don't you write it? And I said, well, I guess I could. And it started off as just like an Invaders source book. And then, I'm like, well, I've got the Invaders. And I had helped, if you're familiar with Technol 13.
Yeah, oh yeah. I love that website.
Firebomb, yeah. I helped him do his Golden Age source book on his site ages ago. That was me and Alistair Dinbar and a couple other people did stats for. And I just sent him a real nice email and said, hey, would you mind terribly if I used your characters as sort of the basis for my source book, and I said, I will happily point everybody in your direction because I want everyone to come see the cool stuff that you're doing here. But I would you mind terribly? And he sent me a real nice email, and he was like, man, you helped contribute all of this stuff once upon a time. Feel free to use it. Just make sure you credit me. And I said, well, dude, that won't be any problem. And so it started off as, like I said, a sort of an invader source book. And then I got to like, what do you mean no one's done stats for the Howling Commandos? What do you mean no one has done stats for the Leathernecks? What do you mean? And it just became this snowball effect. And my little, what was planned to be like a basic some sort of expanded version of a source book became this. Well, you've seen it. It's like 200 and some odd pages. And I've had a lot of people who were like, in my mind, I wanted it to be the Marvel version of the DC version of the book. And I can't remember the name of the it's like World at War or something like that. And it's DC's got a real excellent book. And I thought, man, if this book comes out even a quarter as cool as that one, I will have done something. And I had some players who, once they were able to download it and look at the fully rendered thing, were like, oh my God, this is as good as that. And that was like, that was it for me. I couldn't get any higher, praise than that. And I said, well, that's it. So it just, and then from there I did, and the funny part's this, I did the Golden Age source book last fall. Mm-hmm. I did this, I finished it. One of the guys from the Canon group was going to help me edit it together, and he ran into some personal problems in his life and wasn't able to help me finish it. So I ended up doing it. But this was after I wrote the Silver Age book, which somebody else was supposed to help me edit together, and they ran into some personal problems in their personal life, and I ended up editing both books together. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if people are going to get it. And I did the Silver Age book. My intention was to make it like a comic book. You would have in-house ads, and you would have
we like
all the little. Yeah, I know. I've listened to the podcast, and I was.
We loved it. Yeah.
And my wife was like, oh my God, they got you. They got they got it. They got, they understood what you were going for. And I'm like, yes, sweetie, we all collectively share the same brain, probably. Everybody gets it, So, and it was one of those things where I tried to make it as user-friendly as possible with as much information. And will you ever need stats for, I don't know, the Dragon Men of Mars or whoever? Maybe not, but if you want to use them, there you go. So as to how it all got started or how I sat down and figured out what I was going to do, it's as simple as making a list. And I mean, in really the simplest terms, I just sort of figured out what I wanted to put in it, which characters, with the Golden Age stuff. And there came a time when I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish this. I don't know if this is going to be 2 books or 3 books. There's just so much stuff here. And every time I was turning a page, it was like, God, there's another great character. I gotta stat this guy out. Just, and my biggest issue with the Golden Age stuff was it's so racially stereotyped. Oh my God, it's horrible. And I'm like, how in the world am I going to make this palatable to anybody? Whitewash Jones, who, if you've ever seen the character in the 40s as opposed to what he's become now, they've sort of modernized him and gave it more of a, they did stuff with the character. And I was like, how on God? And I have a real good friend who's not Caucasian, we'll say that. And I said, listen, how do I do this? How do I sit down and make this work? I said, because I'm really sort of afraid of offending people,
Yeah.
And he said, well, your best bet is just to shoot straight go from the heart, and you just be honest and talk about it in the opening and sort of go from there. So that's what I did. But the Silver Age stuff was a whole nother can of worms, because a lot of stuff got retconned into the Silver Age. There's a lot of stuff in the book that really didn't appear in the Silver Age Atlas stuff. And then there's characters who were specifically from that time. The issue you ran into with the Golden Age stuff was everybody was a Nazi. After a certain point, everybody was a Nazi. Everybody was a Japanese saboteur, or and yes, that's what they were fighting at the time. But I mean,
that was the time frame. So
yeah, everybody. So when they did it in the 50s, it was everybody's a commie, and it's like, oh, for crying out loud, So, and you just have to present it in the best possible fashion, and
hope
without making it look horrible, and hope for the best.
Well, I could definitely say that in our chat right now, Screaming Skull Productions you said you did an awesome job on the Silver Age book.
Thank you.
So you got some props right there.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It was a lot of hard work. A lot of the movie poster stuff was taken from other places, or I found it online, or I made it. And by no means am I an expert on PDF. I learned everything that I learned from pestering several of the people in the group, and trying to get, talking to them and trying to find out, how in the heck do I do this? And a lot of it is just pure happenstance that it turned out as well as it did. The artist who found me the cover art for the Silver Age book did not like the back cover art for the book at all, and he was like, "It doesn't look good. That's not going to play right." And I found a version of because all the pictures I found were fairly small, and when you blew them up, it pixelated.
Oh, okay.
And I finally found a picture that was the correct size by just pure happenstance. As a matter of fact, I had given up on looking. I was still trying to figure out everything I was going to do with it, and I thought I found it. It was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. And he ended up, I guess everybody liked it, so I've got a lot of compliments on it. And I was tickled pink that you guys reviewed it as, and that was another case where George was like, "Hey, do you know that they're going to talk about it in an upcoming podcast?" And I was like, "What podcast? What are you talking about?" Being on the fringes of all that, so that's how I found out about y'all. So, but yeah,
we kind of just came out of nowhere with this podcast. So we did another podcast, and we were just like, hey, it'd be kind of cool if we did the Marvel FASERIP podcast, and work with that, because there's so much material out there that nobody knows about, and I'm telling people still to this day about all the things that you've created, not you personally, the group, the Canon group, the Uncanon group that you guys created. And people are like, wait, there's new material? I said, well, yeah, it's not official, but it's just almost as if TSR was still producing material to this day for the Marvel game. They're like, no. I'm like, yeah. And I gave them the link to a bunch of things. And they're like, wow, this almost looks just like as if TSR was doing it. I said, yeah, these guys have actually taken the time to emulate and copy what TSR was doing, and just picked up the baton, the torch, whatever you want to say, and just ran with it. And who actually started this whole canon thing exactly?
I think it was a combination of a couple of different people, and you would have to ask them. I came into it, and there was probably 100 people in the group at the time. So I have no idea who was like I think George and Steve, and I don't want to give anybody's last name out, because if you're in the group, you know who they are.
Right.
So I think they were the creators, and that's how I ended up meeting both of them. Well, like I said, I've known George for a long time by email, and Steve I met, I want to say, on the Classic Marvel Forever message boards, and that's how I got interested in it. And just, and it's worked out. If there's a process to any of it, I mean, if anybody wants how do I get started, and that's a question that I've had asked, and basically, you, like I said, make a list of what you want to do.
Okay.
I'm working on a Thor Asgard book with my cousin, who's a biblical scholar and who loves Thor. And so I pestered him into, I said, look, you need to help write this. This is, I said, we can actually have the only RPG book ever written by a biblical scholar about, Norse mythology. And he's like, well, okay, So, yeah. And it was one of those things where I got to a point in it, and let me just say that it's statistics for characters. I think the biggest divisive argument you're going to have in any gaming group, especially Marvel, is what people believe stats should be as opposed to what's been established, say by the original writers and the intent, or what might have been how they view updates to have gone. And I've had people who wanted to argue with me about the material strength I made Mjolnir. And I said, well, I actually we have the people who are writing this have spoken about where that material rank is and what it is and how, we've had this conversation. We've played devil's advocate with one another. We put it at that for a specific reason and intend to explain it. If you're asking what I think it should be, well, it's been a couple different things. One version has it as class 3000 and the other has it as class 1000. And predominantly it's been class 1000. And the explanation that we came up with, and it's going to be in the book, is that Mjolnir over the last probably 20 years has been broken several times, and it's been repaired. And it's always come at some great cost. And our thought was that originally it was class 3000, and that after it's been broken several times and repaired several times, the rank has dropped to class 1000 material.
That's logical. Yeah, that would logically work, yeah.
And I mean, that's just, the other issue that you run into is if you're going to write something like this, my suggestion would be create your own list of what you want to do and how you want to do it. Sit down and look at what other, it's like with any writing. I write. I mean, I've written beyond this. I've written 3 novels that haven't been published. A Star Wars RPG book. Does it make me? By no means am I Stephen King or Clive Barker or whoever, but I certainly know how to write. So, interesting. You find something you're interested in, whether it's Marvel's Golden Age or revising X-Men Children of the Atom. And from there, decide what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And just go from there. Look at, the best way to do stat modeling is to look at what's been written. I mean, you have to read, far be it for me to tell people how to model stats, but read the comic books. That's going to be your best indicator. Marvel Universe. Whether it's the hardback, expanded, revised Marvel Universe, or whether it's 120 issues of Thor, God of Thunder, or whatever it is. Just sit down and read it and look at it and sort of analyze it and break it down and go from there. It's it's one of those things where you just try to give as much information as possible in the best possible way and hope that it works for the best.
What so when you guys do your books, the format itself, what program do you use? Do you use Word or InDesign, or
for myself,
you personally,
I have Microsoft Word.
Okay.
So I can go in, and originally I didn't have any idea of what font was being used or what size, and so I was using like New Courier 12 and And then someone, was like, well, there is a specific font, there is a specific size, and we're doing a specific formatting to emulate that as much as possible. And I said, well, okay, and they're like, oh yeah, you probably need to break this down into columns. And I was like, columns? What are columns? And so, and thankfully Steve, who did probably I would say a quarter, if not half of the Golden Age book before I took it over, had set it up well enough that I was able to look at it and go, okay, well, this is how I need to do what he's done and emulate it as much as possible. So when, by then I had done the Silver Age book, I had been looking at what he had done and finished that up first. And because I'd had it edited to a point where I could get it to work, I could get it actually functional looking. And it's just, I think to me, the biggest issue is making the covers look like something that would be a cover, as opposed to.
You guys do a good job on that. I'm just saying, you guys did a great job on the covers. I mean, damn.
Yeah, and we have a guy who's in the group, and I don't want to mention too many names, and I say that only because everybody should have their privacy. You know what I mean? And my suggestion would be, if you want pointers on like how to do cover artwork and stuff like that, those are the people you need on the show. Those guys can tell somebody, because he sat and explained it to me, and he's just like, look, the best way you can do it is, I can set it up for you like this, and I could find the clip art for you, and it worked great. And God only knows what it would have been had I not had the contributions of the people who helped me get it to where these two books are. Because I was just like, oh my God, this is going to be, I had visions of 1990s AD&D modules, like, this is horrible looking, my God, what did I do? I'm going to burn this out in the backyard and pray that no one downloads it off the internet, that sort of thing. And it turned out so much better and just so good, and I was just so proud of it. I'm glad that it's been well received. I'm just so happy that it has been. So.
Well, yeah, we have to get some more people on here to talk about the process, because I know a lot of people have lots of questions on it. And in our chat, I'm seeing that Screaming Skull is saying he uses CorelDRAW X8, and Corel Photoshop, and Paint Pro 2018 for all his projects.
See, and yeah, that's, like I said, that's beyond me. I'm like, when all of my stuff is click and drop into Microsoft Word, and I'm surprised it comes out looking half as good as it does. With the Asgard stuff, I've tried to find a lot of Kirby clip art for the characters,
right?
And because let's be honest, Jack Kirby put it on the map. When you can say, and I love explaining to people, I don't get a lot of opportunity to talk about comic books because I'm that guy that's I won't say I know everything about comic books. Who knows everything, right? But as a kid, that's how I learned to read. And I was 4 years old and running around with Marvel Comics, learning to read from my uncles and older brother. And that was one of those things where now you look back on it and people will go, well, people, especially laymen, who have no idea, they go and see these movies and they're like, well, okay, who's that old guy? And it's like, well, that's Stan Lee, he wrote all of these books. Well, who, and then you get to talking about like, well, Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko, who passed away, and like, just passed away. That's.
I saw the announcement this morning, in fact.
Yeah, I think I saw it, if not this morning, yesterday, and I saw it. I was at playing a role-playing game last night and happened to check the internet and was like, oh my God, I can't believe he passed away. And I don't want this to sound callous, but at 90 years old, as old as these guys are getting, you expect that they're not always going to be around. But I guess because he had left the community, such as it was, and really wasn't doing anything comic book related, and hadn't for a long, long time, or at least didn't seem to be. I didn't know if he was even still alive at this point. But all of my heroes growing up were people like Carmine Infantino, and who did the Flash, and Jim Aparo, who did Batman. And these were guys that workhorses who you could drop stuff on their desk and they would have you an issue in like a week and a half or whatever. Sal Buscemi, John Romita, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko. I mean, and of course, I'm not old enough to have read the original Amazing Spider-Man run, but all of my stuff was Marvel Tales. That 40-issue run where they reprinted the first 40 issues of Spider-Man. And I can remember sitting reading those thinking, oh my God, this is so great. Who's this Steve Ditko guy? Why isn't he drawing Spider-Man anymore? Not knowing there's a whole history to it, And you'd have to explain who Jack Kirby is or who these people are. And they go, wait a minute, you mean this artist guy like drew all these characters? And it's like, yeah. Well, who did he help create? And it's, well, let's see. X-Men, Avengers, Thor, Iron Man. You start naming people and they're like, well, which X-Men? The original. Well, oh my gosh, that's a lot of stuff. Yeah, they're unsung heroes. They're the Golden Age guys were unsung heroes. That's I tried to put as much, at least for the dedication portions of the book. And I know that's really good, sort of against the grain, but how do you not make a Golden Age Marvel book and then talk about the people who helped create it? And I wanted to put in references to, whether it was Bob Kane with Batman or Bill Finger with Batman, and whether it was Stan or Joe Simon or who's Joe Simon, who's still alive. That's these guys are national treasures, and why isn't more being done for them? And it's sad. It's a sad statement. So, but hey, that's not why we're here.
No, it's yeah. And honestly, the way Stan Lee has been lately, I don't expect him. And I hate to say it, I expect to see the headlines one day for him, and I don't want to say that, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and there's nothing that anybody's going to be able to do about it. Unfortunately, these guys are physically well past their prime. They're very, very old men, and they've lived a long life, and some of them have done very well for themselves, and some of them not so much. But so yeah, I've just done a lot of different stuff, and I did a lot of like DC conversions to Marvel, and had a number of websites where we talked about campaigns I ran. There was a deadendavengers.com that was one of those where it was the campaign characters that we did, where in the campaign that I ran this thing for probably 20 years off and on. But we played ourselves as superheroes. So, I mean, it was just a strange concept. I never thought it would last. I was trying to run a Titans West game, and certainly didn't want to run that. But the long and short of it was that I got stuck running this. We were an Avengers auxiliary out of Ohio, where we lived, the little town that we lived in, and God only knows we had a menagerie of supervillains that were people that you would go, that guy's a supervillain, really? Spatula King, I see you are here again. So you have to come up with stuff. So, and I'm just glad to have been a part of it all, and glad to have still be around and still have an interest in it, and still, people go, oh my God, that was a great book. What are you going to do next? And I got the Thor book that I'm working on, and
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, you're not the only person. I've had people chomping at the bit. When are you going to finish it? When are you going to finish it? It's like, just it's, if it was easy, everyone would do it.
Take all the time you need. I'm willing to wait because I know the product will be good at the end. So,
hey, I appreciate the kind words. I talked about because that was another thing that George and Steve and I talked about, was like, well, what do you want to do next? And I said, well, yeah, I said, I got this Thor book. And then there's a guy in the group who, we're going to do a series of mythology books, and it's going to be different pantheons from different countries. I originally did the Norse, Olympian, and Egyptian gods. And he was like, well, you ought to do the, we talked about doing like the Japanese gods as well. And then it became this, hey, we should do a series of books. And I'm like, well, if you want to co-author these things, I'll be happy to do it. I said, I don't know how much free time I've got. I've got a 4-year-old grandson who keeps showing up wanting to play Indiana Jones Lego with me. And, he doesn't understand why we're not doing that this very instant. So he lives next door. He's like, Papa, we play video games? And I'm like, no, buddy, I got a podcast I got to do. Papa, what's a podcast? And I was like, I'll explain it to you later. So he's, I'm sure, waiting out there somewhere,
lurking, waiting to play.
Yeah. Oh, hey, he's hysterical. He really is. He likes superheroes, but all the stuff he likes is geared towards 4-year-olds. Wow. So now my granddaughter, who's a year older, is like, Papa, I like that Ant-Man Wasp movie because that girl is crazy like me. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's just what Papa wants to hear right now. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't seen it yet. I'm gonna
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I look forward to seeing that movie. But yeah.
Oh, I won't spoil anything for anybody. It's enjoyable. If you like the first one, chances are you'll like this one. And that's another thing that I would like to see more women contribute to this stuff. And I don't mean that in just just as players, but I would like to see stuff written from the female perspective. Maybe we need, and all of the people writing stuff right now are guys, and I would love to see something written by somebody who wasn't testosterone driven. Something different.
I don't know why they don't, because there are quite a bit of women that read comics, that cosplay, that live and breathe comics just like you and I do. So maybe it's they don't realize the game is there. I mean, maybe they're focused on newer games instead. I mean, I know DC has their newer game, and Marvel had Marvel Heroic for a while, which is long gone now. But
and maybe it's I read an article where it was about female gamers, and they were talking about they're tired of being challenged by, they'll show up and it's, oh, well, you're not as knowledgeable as I am because you're a girl. And oh my God, that nonsense. And I'm like, look, I don't talk about comic books to normal people because a lot of times it's a one-sided conversation. You know what I mean? And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. If you talk about it to somebody who has no idea what you're talking about, you end up talking for 45 minutes about whatever, and they're just sitting there doing this.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And
that's why, if I run into people who are comic book fans or who are role play enthusiasts, I can, and I'll sit and talk to them, and they're like, wow, I can't believe you're into this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I met a couple live action role players who do the Society for Creative Acronyms.
Oh yeah, I love them.
And they were like, well, you like D&D, you should get out and do this Society for. And I said, I don't want to dress up. Look, I'm overweight as it is. I live in Georgia. This is not a good combination. Okay. You really don't want me prancing around in some tight-fitting outfit sweating on you. So that's just, yeah, you're laughing about it, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's the last thing. I mean, Texas, I know that's got to be hot. I've been to Orlando, the most humid place on earth,
But Texas is not humid, so that's the difference. We're just hot as heck.
Yeah. I mean, in the summer here, it's 105 in the shade. And that's if you're lucky, and you better have central heating air. You better hide inside. You better have an inside job if you survive very long. Otherwise, it becomes a whole different ballpark. So, but no, like I said, I just would like to see more stuff done from the female perspective, or maybe even somebody ought to write a module. Somebody's got to.
I don't know many women that actually, except for one, that play FASERIP, and that was a girl that was in my group last year before she went away to a different college. We were playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, well, let's switch it up for a little bit of a break. And she was like, yeah, okay. And I was like, what about a superhero game? And she's like, oh, I love, I read comics all the time, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, great. Marvel. And she's like, I never heard of this game. I'm like, well, that's because you're 22. That's probably why you've never heard of this game.
It was canceled before you were born. Yeah.
And she's like, really? What? Well, tell me more about it. And I gave her the website and everything, and she just like dove into it, downloaded all the books from the website, and printed them out. And she was like, blah blah blah. And she was great at the game. She learned it like that, and I hopefully right now she's at whatever college she went to, and she has the books, and she's forcing other people to play with her. No, she's getting other people to enjoy the game too.
We could say forcing. It's okay. She's probably utilizing mind control.
Oh gosh, yeah. So to wrap all this up as we're getting onto the hour mark here, without starting wars, here's a question for you to think about here, and maybe tell us what your opinion is.
Okay.
Why do you think the Marvel FASERIP game has all this love still going to this day when the DC game really doesn't? They were both rival games for its time, both hailed for their innovative mechanics and their play, and depending on where you look, DC better, Marvel better as far as role-playing games, as far as hero games. But the Marvel game is up here, and the DC game is down here. And I'm part of the DC group on Facebook and on Google Plus and on Reddit, and it's dead. And then here's the Marvel game, and it's like, boom, you guys, boom, boom, boom. And the DC does have its own community that does create stuff. There's one gentleman that's out there that does. His name is Eddie, I believe. And he does it all by himself. And he's the only guy. And I see a couple blogs here and there, people doing it, but there's no one doing it like you guys. Yeah, blogs are something different. Anybody can blog something, and I'm not putting down bloggers, but that's not putting it into a format for people to download.
That's it. You're talking about your experiences instead of writing an immersive content. So why do I think Marvel has gotten more love over the years than DC? And that's I think once upon a time it was reversed, because DC segued into Blood of Heroes, which was they used the same game mechanics and just changed the name of the brand. And for a while there, Blood of Heroes was running pretty good. And I was part of the DC email list that their stuff was much better written than the Marvel stuff was. They would give you like psychological profiles for the character, histories, all sorts of stuff. And I can remember reading these things going, why isn't the Marvel stuff like this? Why isn't any, because most people would just go, okay, this is the FASERIP, this is how much his resources are, this is a couple talents, and like no background, no history, no, and you're looking at it going, what's this? I got some stats, I mean, and now I think it's just more of a, you have people who have a fond memory of it, who have gathered together and basically said, we want to recreate as much of this as we can and bring new, not only new statistics and new information, but just new content in general. No one had, and it killed me that no one ever did a Marvel Golden Age book. I was like, how could they have not done it? Even if it was just, when you look back on what they did, and I can remember thinking, well, wow, Marvel's done a lot of stuff. TSR did a lot of stuff with Marvel. And the simple reality of it was they didn't. I mean, The original game had 10 modules, a handful of supplements. The advanced game had, what, 10 modules, 4 supplements,
Something
the
like
gamer's
that.
handbooks.
Yeah.
And then you had the revised basic book, which the Doom box set, the Spider-Man box set, the Avengers box set, the X-Men box set. Please God, and the issue that I ran into was that they kept regurgitating the same information over and over again. You're not getting new stats for these characters. You're just getting the same stats for these characters. It might be a build that's different for Wolverine from, say, you got Children of the Atom Wolverine, you got Wolverine from the Judge's book, you got Wolverine from the revised basic book, you got Wolverine from the Gamer's Handbook. And a lot of times these stats just aren't consistent with one another. And, there's talk about doing an update on Weapons Locker.
Oh, yeah, I did see that, yeah.
In the canon group. And I said, and they were like, do you have any thoughts on this? And I said, well, I would love to see it, but, if you're going to include, say, for instance, Mjolnir from Thor, I said, don't include things that are specific to characters unless they've not been done before. I said, because who wants to see Mjolnir stats for the 15th time? Who wants to see, stats for the X-Jet for the 15th time? I mean, it's been done. Let's do something that, what about Moon Knight's helicopter? That's never been statted, not that I know of. What about some of Moon Knight's equipment? That's never been statted. Why not that? So, and that was my thing on it. And I think that in the long run, you could do anything with Marvel. You could probably do anything with DC to a great. But DC seems like it's more geared towards cosmic characters and more of a cosmic level game, and Marvel is more, and maybe it comes down to the. I read an article about the movies, and people were talking about Batman versus Superman and, say, the Iron Man movies, and they were talking about how the DC movies are so dark and foreboding, and Marvel movies are light and fun, and are there stakes? Sure, there's stakes. Is there, could it be possible that some of these characters could die? Absolutely. But the question came down to, which universe would you rather live in? Batman versus Superman or Iron Man? And people were like, overwhelmingly, oh, Iron Man, because Iron Man looks like he's having fun. He, Tony Stark is cracking wise and smiling and having a good time, romancing women and whatever else, and Batman just looks like he's angry.
Well, that's Batman.
Do you really want to? Yeah, but it's Batman. People complained about Ben Affleck playing Batman, and I thought he did a decent job. I mean,
I think he did fine too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the modern day Batman. What were you expecting? So, if I have to put it in the simplest terms, probably, and I'm certainly this is a long-winded response to it. I apologize.
No, you're good.
I think that if anything, your best bet is going to say that Marvel is a lot more fun. It's easier. You can roll up a character and be playing a game in less than 10 minutes. And I don't remember DC being anywhere near that quick. Every time I looked at DC, and I own every version of the game except for City of Blood or Blood of Heroes or whatever it was called. And every time I looked at it, I was like, I need to know geometry. There you go. I've got that. I've got the original. Before they cut all the stats in half, and the blue box set.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
With the Perez artwork.
I never got that. All I got was Blood of Heroes.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Blood of Heroes, and then I wound up getting this DC3 book.
Uh-huh.
I have the Batman role-playing game also, which is more of a street level game.
Yep.
You remember when that came out in '89 because they tried to capitalize on the whole
Tim
Batman.
Burton.
Yeah, Tim Burton's Batman.
And that's, like I said, I just think it comes down to it's an easy game. The players that I've had, I've done DC campaigns in Marvel. I find it easier to do it that way. You can people understand FASERIP. You start giving them numbers, and it's like, do I have to go? Is this geometry? Did I miss something? Is there a test later? I don't know how to figure out pi. I don't want to do that. So I don't know. If anything, to me, it's more fun. I had more fun playing Marvel than the few times I tried to play DC. And everybody that I've ever run it for has universally liked it. I had people who were like, I would never play a superhero game. You're never going to convince me. And we got 3 games into a campaign, and the one guy who was telling me, you're never going to convince me, was like, so how long are you planning on running this? I said, well, why do you ask? And he goes, well, me and my wife were up till like 3 o'clock in the morning last night trying to figure out what we're going to do with our characters. And it hadn't been like that in years. And now he occasionally runs it for his kids on game night. So, if anything, and he keeps like, you got to come visit. You could run Marvel for us. And I'm like, I think we're well past our prime, Todd. Don't do that to me. So, but it's fun. And at the end of the day, I think if anything, you can do anything with it.
Yeah, I've actually run a G.I. Joe campaign.
Oh yeah,
FASERIP.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it blew it when I went looking for stats for like the Howling Commandos, and I'm like, how is it that Marvel never did stats for the Howling Commando? I mean, they did Nick Fury, they did some of the Shield, they did a bunch of the Shield agents, but they never did the Howling Commandos. And the closest you get is all this in World War II, the module where they have Nick Fury and Dum Dum Dugan's World War II stats, and then they have typical Howling Commando stats that are like 50 health, 30 karma, and I'm like, really? Everybody's got good strength, huh? Okay, if you say so. So, and I like I said, I just try to give them a little bit of, if you're gonna stat these guys out, try to make it as real as you can and just have fun with it. I had people who I statted Sergeant Rock and Easy Company when I was doing my merged universe thing. There's a guy from Easy Company, and they never give him a last name, and he gets killed off, but his name was Nick. And my thought was, Nick is Nick Fury, gone off. Rock used to be his CO, and now you've got the Howling Commandos, and you got Easy Company, and and I'm like, this works. You could make this work in a shared universe. So, and you can do anything with it. I mean, I've known people who've run Star Wars in Marvel. I ran a 1940s game long before I ever wrote a supplement for it in Marvel. I've run like a Batman Gotham by Gaslight, 1800s, Marvel game. I've done Legion of Superheroes. Now, to me, Legion would work better with this is just strictly an opinion. The D6 Star Wars West End Games. I think you could do an easy Legion game. You would have to figure out some way to do powers, but the game mechanic lends itself to that very easily.
WEG did have its own DC game too back in the day, if you remember. DC Universe, which had those funky dice that had Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Darkseid symbols on it. Darkseid. It was part of the Master System, I believe. I never really got into it. I have it somewhere. I just never ever played it.
Yeah, same here. I bought it. Was like, oh wow, this is really, what the heck is this? Oh my god, I'd rather do geometry.
It was part of that whole when they made the Hercules Xena box sets out there.
Not a lot of people remember, but West End Games did Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I have those too. That was fun. I like Ghostbusters.
But see, there you go. I am, I think my next campaign, and I've got probably a year or so before I'm even get anywhere close to it, but my next campaign is going to be, if you're familiar with it, Old FASA Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah. Wow, yeah. I know some people that still play that.
I'm one of them. I mean, I ran a campaign probably about 10 or so years ago, and the players who played in it loved it and were like, oh wow, we got to do more of this. And we've done a lot of Marvel and done Star Wars and done a lot of different stuff. And it's like, I got a friend who's going to run a Star Wars like game in between the end of the AD&D game we're playing in and when I do mine. And I said, well, I don't want to run something similar. I'm just going to run Doctor Who and just be completely different about it. So, but no, I mean, as long as you're having fun, and I think at the end of the day, that's probably what makes Marvel work a whole lot better. I mean, it's the house of ideas, and it's, you know,
I love them both. So
yeah, and I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, I love DC. I learned to read from Batman and Superman comic books. My brother would, I would ask my brother questions like, well, how did Spider-Man get his power? How did the Incredible Hulk get his powers? And he knew it all. And I have, my grandfather bought me a copy of Origin of Marvel Comics. And years later, I bought a copy of Son of Origin of Marvel Comics, which if you've ever read them, they came out in the 70s. They're probably 40 years old now, and people are probably largely unfamiliar with them. But I got Stan Lee to sign my Origin of Marvel Comics to my grandfather. So, and it was my way of sort of giving back to my grandfather, who made comic book reading special for me. That's
nice. I like that.
I said,
yeah,
and I mean that was he's in the dedication to the Golden Age book, and it's just one of those things where I try to make it as immersive and as fun as I can, and I hope that it all worked out. And I think, like I said, I think if anything, that's where Marvel's strength comes from. It's, you're in a universe, you can do anything you want. Whether you want to establish it as Marvel Prime, it's the Marvel Universe, the current. I mean, I don't know about your Marvel Universe, but mine is always sort of like, if the Marvel Universe was stuck at about 1989, 1990, that would be my Marvel Universe. You have the West Coast Avengers out on the West Coast. You have the East Coast Avengers out on the East Coast. The New Mutants are still running around. The X-Men are still the X-Men we all knew and grew up with. And, can you do different stuff than that? Sure you can. You could do an Ultimates version. You could do
lots of things.
Exactly. And anything works with people. So, I think that's probably the biggest strength it has.
I think it basically, to sum this all up before we take off, and I think Screaming Skull in our chat said a little while ago, simplicity.
That's it.
Is how Marvel wins, simplicity.
That's it. I mean, at the end of the day, when you can make up a character in 10 minutes and get going. And I don't know about you, but a lot of players that I had were, they didn't want to spend 25 minutes coming up with some elaborate backstory, and we just filled it in as we went. You don't need to name all your contacts right now. It may be, you might know Commissioner Johnson, the local chief of police, or it might be the guy who owns the local laundromat, where you have, he lets you use the laundromat at night when no one else is around so you can wash your costume. So.
That's funny. I like that. Alrighty. I thank you for joining me this week on this episode number 9 for our Classic FASERIP podcast. And you can go to the classicfaserip.com to download all the rest of our shows. Check us out on youtube.com/c/theevildm. For the rest of the live shows that we've done in the past, we'll be back again for another show. Hopefully, Mr. Keith here can join us again if he's not too busy and he enjoyed himself and doesn't run away hiding.
Yeah. No. If you want me back, Vincent, I will come back. I mean, I'll be happy to do it. So
absolutely. So with that said, head over, listen to those things. Check out my actual play if you're interested in Marvel actual play. Marvel's X Universe. You can find it on any platform, or you can go to rollhighordie.com to listen to directly on the website, along with the other fine podcasts we do on there. So we're going to say good night, everybody.
Good night.